Or good evening, whenever you're listening, however you're listening, wherever you're listening. We appreciate that you are. This is the Delaware High School Football Pod presented by Websites for Sports, and we're the only media outlet dedicated exclusively to Delaware High School football. The pod is available wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and also on YouTube for those who prefer to watch what you're listening to. Follow us on Twitter at DELHS Football and on Facebook at the DELHS Football Pod. Please like us, share us, do all that stuff you do, which helps us promote high school football. All right. Marty Sheehan, it is time for the championship games. You know, it's hard to believe we're at this point of the season. It seems like just yesterday, you and I were back in May trying to figure out when we wanted to start the podcast, right. Those types of things. And it's just unbelievable that we are here now, getting ready to head into championship weekend. And it is a weekend this year. It's actually a Friday, Saturday. And so that's the first thing we want to talk about. They've finalized the schedule. University of Delaware, with a win over Lafayette yesterday, they're heading out to Montana. And so I'll not be flying out to watch them. I'll watch them at home. I wasn't at the game yesterday. But anyway, long story short, they're not going to have a home game this weekend. So that means it's going to be a Friday night and a Saturday. So here's the schedule. On Friday night, the unified teams are going to kick off at 5 o'clock. And while we mentioned unified, it's going to be either Caesar Rodney High School or Appoquinimink against either Cape Henlopen or Newark Charter School. Those teams both play on Tuesday in their semifinal game. So it's the only semifinal games left. 6 o'clock is the game at Caesar Rodney High School against Appo. 4 o'clock is the game against between Cape and Newark Charter School at Newark Charter School's new stadium. Those games are free to get into for the semifinals. You'll have to pay to see the championships like everybody else, but free for the semifinals. So go check them out if you can. So the unified game will be at 5 o'clock at Delaware Stadium. The 3A game will be at 7:30. And that, of course, will be between Salesianum and Cape Henlopen. One ticket gets you into both those games. Tickets go on sale tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Then on Saturday, the 1A game kicks off at noon, and that will be Charter School of Wilmington versus Tatnall. And the 2A game kicks off at 3 o'clock, and that will be Caravel versus Archmere. So that's your schedule. Again, tickets go on sale at noon. I don't believe they're selling tickets at the gate. I'm still waiting to get final word on that, and people will have that out. We'll tweet it out and stuff like that. But don't count on getting tickets at the gate. Plan to get them ahead of time. And again, on Saturday, you can see both those games for the price is one. So, Marty, it ends up we've got 4 private schools, 1 charter school, and 1 public school in the championship game so far. Not counting unified. And as I was discussing this with somebody yesterday, I don't really count Charter School of Wilmington as a charter school because you have to apply to get in. You have to be really smart to get in or talented musically or, something.
You have to test to get in.
You have to test to get in. And so it's not like Newark Charter where you have to apply and your name gets pulled out of a hat, no matter how much money your parents make and, quite frankly, how smart you are. And so it's a true public charter school. But that being said, Charter School of Wilmington is technically a charter school. So it'll be interesting to see if this opens up the discussion again about should private schools be in their own division, because, it's that way around much of the country. We've talked verbatim about that here on the program with different sports, and I don't want to get into it because that's not why people are tuned in today. But I just thought it was interesting. Because at one point I looked at the semifinals and I thought, boy, this could be a public school dominated championship weekend. And it's not. No. 4 privates, 1 charter, 1 public. So anyway, so what we're going to do here on this podcast is we are going to we're going to recap each of the semifinals, starting with 3A, then go to 2A, then go to 1A. But before we finish talking about 3A, we're going to preview the championship game. And that way, if all you're interested in is the 3A, you can stop listening after that, or you can jump ahead to the top performers and stuff like that. And everything's time-stamped that we sent out. So if you missed that, go to our website page or go back to where you saw this on Twitter and look for where we post it. And you'll see that we've set timestamps for all those things. So you can jump right to those if you want to. So, all right, let's start up at Apocinio Stadium, where Sally's, the top seed, took on Middletown, the number 5 seed. Marty, this is probably the most anticipated game of the weekend, probably. 1, because it was 3A, and 2, because it was 2, teams that a lot of people thought, this is the championship game, no matter who wins on the other side, with all due respect to Cape Henlopen. So Sally's ends up winning 24-14. It was a rematch of their regular season game that Sally's also won 37-14. The Sally's defense had interceptions on Middletown's last 2 drives down the field. And Sally's then advances to their first title game since 2018. There was still the quarterback situation, and I'll let you talk more about that, Marty. Brady McBride started the game, fumbled the ball away, and in comes Ryan Stower. Now, not sure if it was the fumble that created that, but the timing was impeccable.
Yeah, it was.
And so Ryan Stower stayed in and led them the rest of the way, at least the rest of the way to the championship game. The Sally's defense had 7 sacks on Austin Troyer, so their defense really did do one heck of a job. But it's going to be interesting to see. Gene Deladon, it's not the first time he's sent Stower in. It's not the first time he's taken Stower out, if that were to happen. And so, we talked all season long about Gene Deladon likes to play the hot hand, and the hot hand on Saturday night, Friday night was Stower. So, interesting game. Wouldn't have been shocked if it went either way. And there was a play that was made that won't show up in any stat book that I'll let you talk about, and you got the video of it, that kept that game under control, or could have been a difference right off the bat.
Yeah, this first of all, it was much the same as the first game in terms of the line play. Was Sally's line just is dominating right now. Now they had the aberration last week against Smyrna where they gave 40 points, but they went back to playing their usual level of defense in this game. And if you want to see the video, go to my Twitter feed. But it was 7-3 Middletown, and Sally's fumbled the ball away. This was the Stower fumble. It was kind of knocked out from behind him, and went right to a Middletown player who took off down the field. And it's funny because if you watch the video, BJ Aline is about 5 to 7 yards behind the play, and he almost comes to a stop. Excuse me. It looks like he's waiting for the other guy who's right behind the other Sally's player, who's right behind the Middletown player, to make the tackle, but he sees that's not going to happen. The kid starts pulling away. So Aline just zips it into high gear. And I compared it to the DK Metcalf play a few years ago where he ran down a receiver. But it is like he is shot out of a gun down the field, makes the tackle, and of course keeps Middletown from scoring. Sally's eventually scores to take the lead. But you're looking at, when I brought it up to Gene, he said, look, at 14-3, that's an entirely different ball game mentally, the way you approach it, what plays you're going to call. So he said that changed everything. And it really did. And he said this was the epitome of what BJ brings to this team. It's not just the 100 yards here, the 200 yards there, the 4 touchdowns or whatever he has every game. And it's the hustle and the heart and the determination to win. So just an incredible play. But anyway, after that, the Sally defense really took over. BJ Aline had a great game, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns on 30 carries. Gene, again, and he's done this earlier in the season, went to the halfback pass with Aline, a 52-yard touchdown pass to William Newman. Aline, who played quarterback at DMA last year and did a really nice job, has that skill, and he's been on target almost every time they do this season. So the Sally's D, again, pressured Troyer into one of his worst games of the year, same as they did the last time they played. And, he threw up one in the fourth quarter that was kind of unfortunate. It was a 3rd down play, and he was trying to make something happen. And instead of throwing it away, went for the long pass in the end zone, and it was picked off by Sally's. But they ended up picking him off 3 times in the game. They sacked him 7 times. He was harassed constantly in this game. But Sal's offense, 287 yards, 164 passing yards, 164 rushing yards, 123 passing yards. Ryan, McBride, and Stower all had nice running plays on the ground for Sal's. And it was just kind of, again, a workmanlike performance for the Sal's. That they did the same thing they did against Middletown before, which, again, everyone agrees it's the line play. Sally's line is just playing so well right now, and that Paul Warlow led defense is just getting stronger and stronger. And again, they had that weird game in the quarterfinals against Smyrna where they get 40 points, but if you take that out, then it right back to the way they've been playing all season. against Middletown in this one, and Sally's was just a better team, as they've been most of the season. So they're off to the finals, and they look very strong, though. And we'll get to this one, but I would not count Cape out of this one, considering what they did in the other semifinal.
And we'll talk about that in just a second. But before we do, we want to thank Websites for Sports for being our presenting sponsor this year. Brian Rudder started this site nearly 2 decades ago, and it's the one-stop shop place for all the high school sports information you need, whether you're a player, a parent, a coach, or a spectator. Gives you the schedules, gives you the locations, give you the time, gives you a map to the locations, and then features that I love. There's statistics that they've just added this year for the sports. It's it's kind of like the Max Preps of Delaware. Think about it that way. But I actually think more people use Websites for Sports for their stats now than they do Max Preps, or certainly will. It's very easy to get onto. It's local. And so it's really localized, and everybody loves that. And again, my favorite feature I talk about every week is when you can sign up for schedule alerts. I got alerted 4 times this week of my boys' basketball schedules, both boys playing on different teams at Apo High. And so schedules change constantly for one reason or another. And I get the alerts and I end up at the right gym. And so it's one of the best features of the site. So again, thank you for Websites for Sports for sponsoring the podcast and helping us continue to promote the great sport of Delaware high school football. All right, Cape Henlopen and Sussex Central, number 6 seed, the lowest seed in the tournament. And Marty, I'm not sure, and I didn't take the time to look because I'm not sure I could have found it, is if they'll be the lowest seed in a state championship game ever, that number 6. I'm not sure. And somebody maybe will come out with that this week. But they took on number 2 Sussex Central, a team that they had just lost to recently. So that makes it a little bit tougher in some ways. But as we preached last week, it's tough to beat the same team twice in a season. And Marty, this game, 46-14, but it was much closer than that. I was watching the Sally's game on NFHS Network, and I was following on Twitter. I think it was Brad Myers that was down there, and there were a couple other people covering that game as well. And in a period of what I found out was 85 seconds,
Yeah,
Cape Henlopen scored 4 touchdowns. And I kept thinking every time I went back and I saw something, Cape Henlopen scores, I thought, all right, well, is that the poor reporter I was just following? Is that, Brad Myers, or is that somebody else? And, but it's unbelievable that they scored that many points. And, it was a result in some ways of Sussex Central pressing late in the game, trying to get balls up in the air. And this is a Sussex Central team that relies on the, running game more than anything. And so, and we knew Cape Henlopen was good defensively. We've seen them make some big interceptions all season long, but it was just an incredible job by Cape Henlopen for them to get to the state championship game for the first time since 1984. And so none of the Sally's kids have played at Delaware Stadium, because their last appearance was back in 2018, I think it was.
Yep.
It was. And Cape Henlopen, 1984. I'm trying to think, Delaware Stadium was the old Delaware Stadium back then, like it was built in the 50s, similar to what the visitor side still looks like. Let me get that jab in while I'm at it. But anyway, so a great win for Cape Henlopen, coming off their second revenge game of the regular season after they had beaten Dover the weekend before. So great job by Mike Frederick and his team to get to the state championship game.
Yeah, this was kind of back and forth until that 85-second span. And it's crazy because the way it ended up, and there were 2 big turnarounds from the regular season to the playoffs. And this was a 51-point turnaround for Cape from what happened in the regular season. The regular season, they lost to Sussex Central 35-16. So a 19-point deficit. And then they come back and win by 32 in the semifinal. So a huge 51-point turnaround there. But the 2 pick sixes, again, Sussex Central got a little desperate. And I believe there were interceptions on 3 consecutive drives, including 2 back-to-back pick sixes on 2 of them. Marky James was incredible. 30 carries, 180 yards, 4 scores. Plus he had one of the pick sixes.
Yeah.
I thought that one of the kids that really impresses me on this team is the freshman quarterback, Jamison Tingle. And he's been there from the beginning of the season. 7 of 11 completions, 111 yards. 3 of them went to Lexton Westcott, who had a really good game, 72 yards, and is one of their top weapons when he's healthy. But I think that this kid, I watched some of the game, and he's just such poise and confidence for a freshman in directing this offense. And, you're on a big stage, you're in the semifinals against a Sussex Central team with some veteran players, and just performed brilliantly. And again, James doesn't do it alone. He gets help from his friends on the team here, but Cape just seems like they are on a mission this season. It just, Benny Mitchell had a tweet. He said, I believe this will be the first time we have NFL veterans on both sides of the ball. We have Paul Warlow for Sally's and, of course, Mike Frederick for Cape Henlopen. Last year, I don't know if you recall this, but the first game of the season, Sally's, excuse me, I'm still trying to get over my illness from a couple weeks ago. Sally's played Cape Henlopen in the opener last year, and Cape Henlopen just surprised everyone. They held the lead late into the fourth quarter. Sally's got a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to finally win it 28-21. They were down 21-20 late in the fourth quarter. But you and I talked about it. I went back and actually listened to the podcast, and we said, wow, this is Mike Frederick's making an impact here right away. Now, they went on to have a so-so season. I believe they finished 4-6. But going back and looking at that and looking at their games last year, a lot of them were very close. And it was almost like the seeds were being planted last year for what was coming this year. And they've just gotten better and better as the season wears on. The line play, again, as you would expect from a team coached by a former NFL lineman, is amazing with Cape Henlopen. They were dominating Sussex Central late in the game. So all kinds of weapons for Sussex Central, or for Cape, excuse me. And, going into this, I would have said, like you and I, and most people had said, that the Sally's Middletown game was the de facto championship game. At this point, it would not surprise me at all if Cape Henlopen were to win this game. I think Sally's has the stronger overall team, but there's something about this Cape team, and this James kid is just, he's phenomenal. It's like you got two of the better running backs in the state now with Marky James and BJ Aline. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. You have two teams. Cape's got a lot of youth on their team. Gene's got a very deep roster. They also play very good on the lines. So this lines up to be a really good final. Whereas if you had said this was the final maybe 5-6 weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, Sally's probably going to roll in this one. Not so much anymore. This is kind of, I think, and by the way, I think all three of these are toss-ups, considering what happened this weekend.
Yep.
Going into this weekend, I wouldn't have said that. Coming out of it, I believe all three games are possible toss-ups, and this is one of them.
And so Sally's, as we mentioned, last trip to the Delaware Stadium was 2018, where they lost to Sussex Central. Their last championship was in 2013. Cape, last title appearance, 1984. Their last title, 1979. So they've been a long time. You've gone generations since Cape has won a title. So real big for them. And Marty, I thought about this. Cape Henlopen, state champions in field hockey. Soccer team gets to the state championships. To a lot of people's surprise, they were the number one ranked team.
Yep.
But I'm not sure they were the number one team in the state, the way the rankings work. And Sally's ended up proving that. But hats off to them for getting to the title game. And and they also they have a shot to get there in unified sports. And here they are in football. So the big school. It's not a little school. Let's not tease anybody. The big school down at the beach is making noise this year. Here are my questions, and I had a lot of the points you made as well about the two coaches from the NFL, that kind of stuff, two of the best running backs in the state, et cetera, if not the best. Who's going to play quarterback for Sally's?
Yep.
And how short of a leash are they going to have? And is that going to play in the minds of these two quarterbacks? They'll tell you no, but does it play into the minds? It's not the Smyrna situation where you knew you got this series and you're sitting for a series.
Yep.
Back and forth that Mike Judy employed all season long. Can the Sally's defense, and it starts with their line, control Marky James? Because Hodson is the only team in the state that has been able to control him this year. They controlled the entire Cape Henlopen offense. They had 2 first downs, 6 yards, -3 rushing yards.
In hindsight, that is such an odd game for Cape Henlopen. It's crazy.
And again, we don't know all the ins and outs, other than we know that's a fact.
Right.
The stats I just gave you are a fact. And again, not sure if Marky James carried the ball 50 times or carried it 3 times for whatever reason. But the reality of it is those are the stats. And Hodson was the only team capable of doing that against Cape Henlopen. So that's going to be interesting, to see. So those are the question marks I have of this game. Other than that, I agree with you completely. I'm not going to be surprised if Cape Henlopen crowns its second state champion of the fall season. But I think if I think if people were betting money on this game, which they're not, they would probably pick Sally's. You know,
Yep.
you've got a number 1 seed against a number 6 seed. And, you know, they didn't play in the regular season. I think that's an advantage.
I do too.
Certainly for Cape. You know, if you play Sally's during the regular season, you get beat by 30, you're coming in with a little bit different mentality, I think, no matter what anybody says. So I think that's an advantage for Cape. And a Cape team, and I've used this term often during the playoffs, that's playing with house money. Nobody thought they'd be this far. Everybody had them knocked out in Dover. If you can go to Dover and win, and you can go to Sussex Central,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, go to where they just I'm losing my train of thought.
Yeah, they did beat Dover. Yep.
They beat
Sussex
Dover
Central. Yep.
and then they beat Sussex Central, and here they are.
Yep.
And I still have Apo and Sussex Central in my mind, and that debacle in the first round. And so if you can do those two things, there's nothing that says you can't go to Delaware Stadium, which is a neutral field for both these teams. Cape will travel well. They will have a good crowd, as will Sally's. But Cape will travel well, I would hope, and I would think, in fact, even to the point where they might bring busloads of students up on a Friday night to make it even easier.
Yep.
I don't think anybody's going to be shocked at whoever wins this game.
No, and I think they both have good special teams. They both have solid kickers. And with Gene, it seems to be, and just communicating him with throughout the season, it's a feel thing for him as far as the quarterbacks go. Having played quarterback himself, he just gets a feel for who may be struggling and who might come in and you know, be the hot hand. One thing he said that has happened is both of them up their game during practice during the week because they both are aching to play. And much different than the Smyrna situation where it was every other series. Gene just basically goes on who he thinks has the best opportunity to move the team down the field at any given time. So both these guys, the benefit to them, although I'm sure they each want to play the full game, is that they got to be ready the entire time. They got to be up there. They got to be involved in the game. They got to be keeping track of the plays being called and whatnot. And so they're both fully engaged in the game during the game. But it's funny. It's not like one brings a running aspect and one brings a passing aspect. They're very similar skill sets, the two of them. And it's, again, just a feel for who's got the hot hand and who's reading the defense well. And again, the freshman quarterback for Cape, Jamison Tingle, it's such a interesting dynamic with the way the quarterback situations are handled. He's been the starter from day one and has had a phenomenal season running this offense. His numbers aren't great, as you would expect from a freshman, and the fact that Cape loves to run the ball and has Marky James in the backfield. So all in all, a very even on paper matchup, much more even than we would have thought, you know, a month or two ago. And a total toss-up in this game for me. I wouldn't be surprised to see either team walk away with the state championship.
Alrighty, and again, that game's on Friday night, 7 o'clock. Tickets go on sale Monday morning at 9 o'clock online, so be sure to check them out there. All right, that takes us to the 2A games, the two semifinal games, Caravel and Howard and Woodbridge and Archmere. We'll start at the top of the bracket. Caravel with a completely dominating victory over Howard, 36-0. In week 2, these teams faced off against each other, and Caravel won 56-34. I saw an interview with John Reed after the game, and he basically said we changed our defensive coverage because we gave up more points in that game than we've given up all season, basically. Offensively, they rushed for 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. Special teams, Trey Hamlin had a 60-yard punt return. Caravel just dominated this game, Marty. It was it was the most lopsided game of the semifinal games without question. And John Reed has done an exceptional job with that team all season long. They haven't lost a game. Their numbers are staggering on the offensive side, et cetera, et cetera. So just a complete domination by Caravel, which has tinkered with winning a state championship in a few years, but has not pulled it off. And they're hoping this might be the year. Yeah,
this is the second year they're going to go into the championship game undefeated. Last year, of course, lost by 3 to Friends. But yeah, this was a crazy game. In a million years, I would not have seen a shutout coming out of this game. And, the Caravel offensive line just absolutely dominated the Howard defense. And it opened up the passing lanes. It opened up the running lanes, the Millers. Jordan and Craig, of course, not related. Both had good games. Jordan, 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. Craig added 60 yards on the ground. The funny thing was, and I haven't seen the final stats for the game, but into the fourth quarter, I believe Howard had more total yards. And the reason was because Howard was moving between the 30-yard lines pretty consistently. But once they got to about the 30-yard line, boy, Caravel just stiffened and they couldn't do anything. In the first game, Rashawn Matthews I forget how many touchdowns he had. He threw for over 360 yards. In this one, he was 12 of 40. Wow. Now, he did complete them for 265 yards, but 28 incompletions for a kid who's one of the top, if not the top quarterbacks in the state. And he was harassed all night by Caravel. The Caravel defensive backfield, I thought was phenomenal. There wasn't a single time where there was somebody just wide open down the field for Howard where you'd say, okay, they can get back into this if they can do this. It just wasn't happening. And the Caravel, again, I use the word workmanlike. They just kept going down the field and putting up points. And before you know it, I think I tweeted out in the third quarter, said this may be the dagger, and it was 22-0. Well, of course, I didn't know the dagger was 7-0 in the first quarter when they scored their first touchdown. But 12 of 40 with RJ Matthews, that stat just really jumped out at me. This was an amazing performance by the Caravel defense and John Reed and his staff. And boy, the season continues to just roll on for the Bucks. They've had a scare here and there. Nothing too big for them, obviously, right. But for the second year in a row, they go in undefeated, and you'd have to say that, excuse me, you have to say they're the favorite. But we'll talk about the second game, and it's again one of those. Well, maybe not.
And they've been my favorite from the start. I've made that pretty clear. And, the other thing, I'm not sure if they've trailed at all this season, or if they have, it was right off the bat, maybe, and they got right back into it. My point being, what's going to happen if Archmere scores 2 quick touchdowns and all of a sudden they're down 14-0 for the first time all season. But again, those are what if situations.
Yep.
They're going to play the winner of Woodbridge and Archmere. This was a rematch of the 2021 final, won by the Hawks 27-0. Archmere won this one 56-28. It was 14-14 after the 4th series. I was at my son's basketball scrimmage, Marty, and I looked at my phone like at 12:15, and it was 14-14. And I thought, geez, what the heck? What time did this game start? And that's how quickly it went. And then Woodbridge went up 22-14, and Archmere scored the next 29 points to put this away. It was their 8th straight win after a 1-3 starts. And so just an incredible job by Archmere, a team that when Chris Albero left, people figured, well, they've had their shot.
Yep.
We'll wait for the next generation before we get back to the state championship game. And that's not the case. They're there already.
No, they piled up 463 yards of total offense. Tracy Johnson, this is funny for Woodbridge. Excuse me. They not only got off to the quick start, but the first 2 plays of the game, Tracy Johnson went 70 and 63 yards for touchdowns. So the Archmere fans had to be thinking, holy smokes, we're in for a shootout on the day, which they were. 22-22 at halftime. But I don't know what adjustments were made in the second half, but Archmere just came out on fire. I saw one interview where they said that Woodbridge appeared to be focused more on Cole Finesse, and it allowed Miles Kemsky, the quarterback who took over for Albero, to just do most of the work on the offensive side. And they don't ask him to do too much. And boy, he took over in this game. 9 of 17, 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also ran 13 times for 144 yards and 3 touchdowns. Excuse me. Drew Duncan, 4 catches, 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tracy Johnson finished for Woodbridge, 27 carries for 265 yards and 3 touchdowns. Archmere made adjustments on both sides of the ball after halftime. And this Archmere team started 1-3. As you said, they've won 8 in a row now. And there just seems to be, they almost have the same feeling as Cape at the 3A level. They're a team that no one expected to be here at a certain point in the season. And let's face it, one more loss, and they're probably in a game where they may get knocked out in the first round. They may not make the tournament. So every game became a playoff game from that 1-3 start. And the last game they played in that 1-3 start was the 28-2 loss to Caravel, and that kind of propelled them down this road. And now, they come face to face again in the finals. But this feels like one of those games that Caravel is a prohibitive favorite, I would say, going in if there were betting lines. But Archmere just has that kind of team of destiny look to them. I don't know if that'll happen. But again, it would not surprise me if Archmere were to eke out a win here somehow.
And we'll talk about that championship game in just a second. Want to congratulate Marvin Dooley. 2-8 last year, his Woodbridge team was, after being in the state championship the year before. They finish up 9-3. He picked up his 100th win of the season, ended up finishing the season with 101 wins. So congratulations to him and the job he did at Woodbridge to flip that program around. I mean, he inherited a good program, kept it good, went sour for that 1 year last year, 2-8, and flipped it back around. Right back. So great job by him. Also, if you're looking to buy or sell your house, Mary Kate Johnston with Remax Associates will help you do it as if it's her own. She's got over 20 years experience. She sold my wife and I house that's 17 years ago and helped us buy the new one that we're still comfortably in, probably for a lifetime. She's recommended her. We've recommended her, I should say, to dozens of friends who also were completely satisfied and in turn recommended her to their friends. Whether it's your first home and upsize or downsize for yourself, an aging parent, or one of your kids, do yourself a favor and reach out to Mary Kate Johnson with Remax Associates. Her website is marykatej.remax.com. You can also reach out to me. I'd be happy to forward you her contact information. She's got multiple 5-star reviews on Zillow and lots of great comments. You can read at her website. Again, that's marykatej.remax.com. All right, let's go to the 2A championship game. And this game, again, is going to be on Saturday. And it's going to be number 1 Caravel against number 2 Archmere. I guess you could say the way it's supposed to be. These two teams played against each other on September 29th. It was actually one of the closer games Caravel had. And when I say that, I kind of say it in jest. It was 28-2 was the final score. But again, one of the closer games that they had. The Bucks are unbeaten. They average 36.3 points per game in Class 2. I just looked at what their Class 2 numbers were. Yep. They've got 2 excellent running backs, Craig and Jordan Miller, who had great games against Howard. Their roster is deep, and their backups have played. I talked to John Reed about 3/4 of the way through their season. He was there watching another game at it. It must have been a Hodson game because it was on his home turf and it wasn't against Hodson, who they beat, by the way, earlier in the season, a Class 3 team. And he was talking about, we were talking about the lopsided scores, and he said, John, you know me, I don't run scores up. He said, I've been putting 8th and 9th graders, because again, 8th graders are eligible to play at Caravel, in these games. And so my point being that if his backups have to get in, they've got varsity experience, and that's going to be big. And so, Archmere, as we said, they've been a slow and steady improvement throughout the season on both sides of the ball. And so, there's a reason they're the number 2 seed, Marty. And like you said, this is another game where Caravel's probably the favorite, but nobody will be shocked if Archmere ends up lifting that trophy again for the second time in 3 years. And so this should be a good one. I hope it is. I hope all these games are good, because that's what the fans want. Coaches want blowouts on their side, but
that's right.
The fans want close games.
This was an interesting stat I came across too with it. Looking at the schedules. Caravel gave up 47 points in their first 2 games. In the 9 games they've played since, there's one forfeit in there. They've given up 40 total in the 9 games they've played since those first 2 games. This defense is humming along, and one of the questions, to your point, would be when they get punched in the mouth too, how are they going to respond? If Archmere comes out and scores lickety split like they did against Woodbridge, how does that team respond? Last year, the 10-7, just heartbreaking loss for Caravel in the final. I don't see that type of game happening here. I think you're going to see more points than that. Both of these offenses seem to be in a humming mode right now, where they're just, everything's clicking like clockwork. So you've got 2 quarterbacks. Truman Awerta is not really asked to do too much for Caravel, but he's very effective when he has to throw the ball. Miles Kemsky, same thing. He when he is asked to step up, which he was this weekend, huge game. And I think throughout the season, he's been a huge benefit to this team, where maybe they didn't see that coming with Chris Albero leaving. And speaking outside of the team, I'm sure the team coaches expected a lot of him, but Archmere again just has that look of a team that got that special look in their eye, and it's going to be an uphill battle for sure, because Caravel's not going to go down easy to anyone. But interesting contrast of styles here, and I'm sure Archmere is going to have some tricks in the bag to get some footing in this game, maybe early on. But they've got Cole Finese, they've got Miles Kemsky. They do a great job on the ground. They can throw the ball. They've got good special teams. Again, Caravel's the favorite, but it would not surprise me at all if the Auks walk away with a state championship.
And unlike Class 3A and Class 1A, these two teams have experience at Delaware Stadium. For Archmere, it's the third time in 4 years they're playing at Delaware Stadium in a title game. They, of course, won in 2021 against this Caravel team. Caravel lost to Friends last year, 30-6. So they've got that experience as well. And so it's just it's going to be a situation where both these teams have plenty of experience. Caravel won in 2012, lost last year. Is this going to be a year that they can pull it out? For this, head coach Don Reed was played on the first championship that Caravel ever had back in, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s. But
yep.
So again, lots of experience on both sides of the ball for these two. So that's a look at the Class 2A title game preview. And now we move on to Class 1A. Two teams making it for the first time, Charter School of Wilmington and the Tatnall School will start at the top of the bracket with Tatnall, a 28-7 win over Indian River. Tatnall with their 11th straight win with a rookie head coach, Brandon Ireton, a rookie here in Delaware. He's got head coaching experience. Rashawn Lamons, the jack of all trades, was added again. For Indian River, they had just the one score, Grice to Stokes. And they just were overpowered by a Tatnall team. For Indian River, it's their best season since 2012. They finished 8-4. But again, Tatnall, after dropping that first game of the season, then they've rolled it on, and they're 11-1 and heading to Delaware Stadium. No longer flying under the radar, Marty, like we both felt they were well into the regular season. And so everyone is very well aware of Tatnall and their abilities and Rashawn Lamont's abilities. And so they are headed to Delaware Stadium for the first time in school history.
I watched this game start to finish, and it was actually closer than the final score would seem. IR really was able to do a lot offensively, more than I thought they would be against Tatnall. They turned the ball over every time they got down to near the Tatnall goal line. Tatnall also had some great stops. RJ Moore had a stop on the goal line on 4th and goal, that was short to go for Indian River. Of course, the two pick sixes. I mean, Tatnall only put up 14 offensive points in this game, which for them is way below what they've been averaging all season, which is about 45 points a game. So I'm sure going into the championship game, they're going to take some stuff that Charter will, that IR did. Lamons was he was in and out of this game a few times, and there were some cramping issues, things like that, but he'll be healthy for the championship game. But again, a huge game for him. 22 rushing attempts, 195 yards. He gets the tip drill pick six in the first quarter. It was 14-0 fairly quickly, and Lamont scored. I believe it was an 80-yard run on the first play of the game for Tatnall. Excuse me. So right off the bat, it's 14-0, and IR hung around. Dylan Grice, I thought, did a great job. The running backs did a nice job picking up first downs and moving the chains. And the best thing they did all day, I would say, is they kept the clock going, and they kept Lamons and company off the field for large stretches at times. But the defense for Tatnall in the end just kept making play after play after play down by the goal line. Jaden Miner also had another pick six that kind of sealed the deal here. It's going to be really interesting given the way Tatnall has just dominated everybody this year. I was very surprised to see them struggle, but I think in the end, this is a great game for them because they did struggle. Right. So if they do get in a situation where there's a close game, they've been there now. And, hats off to Coach Townsend and IR. I thought their game plan coming into this was just phenomenal. They just at times didn't have the horses to get it done. And that Tatnall defense was the difference. Again, the two pick sixes, put those aside for a second. They just stiffened incredibly when they got down near the goal line, just didn't let anything get through except for the one touchdown, of course, which made it 14-7 at the time. So it was still a game. But IR played well, but Tatnall, they continue to be the class of 1A, and they're going to play a team they've played before in the final. We'll get to that in a minute, but they still look like the team to beat in Class 1A.
All right, they advance from the top of the bracket. Before we talk about the bottom of the bracket, I want to remind you about the Win the Day Planner put together by longtime wrestling coach Dan Rigby, who led both Cesar Rodney and Milford High School to multiple championship appearances and combined 3 state titles. He has years of experience working with athletes of all ages and all abilities. And so it's not just wrestling. This planner is meticulously designed to channel athletes' daily actions toward achieving greatness. There's an 18-week sports season one or a 42-week one, which would cover the entire year. They do have a wrestling-specific one, as you would exact. Doesn't just help kids become better athletes, but better teammates, friends, and most importantly, better people. It helps them plan their day, evaluate what they did and didn't do, and how they're going to change their actions the following day to make that happen. My son has a copy. It was fun for me to look through it. And as I was doing so, I was thinking, you know what? I need to use this planner, and I'm no longer an athlete. I just need to use it myself. It's everything from what's your first goal academically of the day to how many bottles of water you're going to drink. And I don't drink enough water. And that's what made me think I needed to use it. You can get your print or digital copy today at winthedayplanner.com. Again, that's winthedayplanner.com. All right. So the bottom of the bracket, Charter School of Wilmington, 10, Polytech, 0. This is a charter team that lost 40-0 in week 2 to Polytech. Polytech averaged 32.4 points per game. They were shut out for the first time since the opening game of the 2021 season. So this potent offense has not just been a fluke here in 2023. It's been going on for a couple of years.
Yep.
But the problem for Polytech in this game that they haven't had all season, they had 5 turnovers, several penalties. And so that will be the doom, and any coach will tell you that if you've got 5 turnovers in a football game at any level, the chances of you winning are very, very slim. And so, Marty, it was the best season ever for head coach David Eilers and Polytech. They've turned that program around, hosted their first playoff game and won it. Didn't win their second one, but still just a great season for Polytech. And, you know, what this does, and we've talked about this, Marty, continually, this class system, what it's done is it's reinvigorated football programs in both class 2 and especially in class 1 that would have just continued to spiral downhill because football players would not want to go play for a school that's going to win 1 or 2 games a year, which is what was happening with some of these programs. So again, when they look back at some of the Cinderella stories of switching this class system to what they've done, these 2 teams, Charter School in Wilmington and Polytech, are going to be the ones whose pictures you see when you look them up in the dictionary of class systems in Delaware when they changed that, because
that's right.
It has benefited them tremendously. But Charter School of Wilmington advances, their best season ever. It's going to be their first appearance in a state championship as well. So a great job by Charter School of Wilmington.
This was incredible. A 50-point turnaround from the first game. You lose 40-0, and then you win 10-0. And John Hedrick, who's the defensive coordinator for Charter, said they made some adjustments here. So some things they did far differently than they did again at Polytech in the first matchup. One of the things we talked about last week was Charter's inability to put points on the board. Now, 10 is not an offensive explosion by any means, but they hit the touchdown fairly early. Roman Paoli, a 53-yard touchdown pass to Brady Arch, who was all over the field in this game. After that, they put the clamps on Polytech, and I kept checking this game. And of course, it's one of those, it has the NFHS network camera at Polytech, but there's no information. There's no score. There's no time. There's no quarter. It could be 80-0. It could be nothing in quadruple overtime. So I had to watch this for a while to get a feel for it. But the one thing I just saw is that the Charter defense just continuously thwarted the Balsaracs, the quarterback and wide receiver for Polytech. There was just nothing there. They harassed the quarterback the entire game. They got a 31-yard field goal to seal it in the fourth quarter from John Foley. And, as we always do, I always like to point this out. Dom Paoli was the long snapper and Arian Meta was the holder. And because I always think that's such an important field goal at that point, because at 10-0 with about 6 minutes left, now it's a totally different feel to this game. So Juan Aldis, junior linebacker, terrific game. He recovered a fumble in the game's first play. But his biggest moment, right before halftime, and I was watching this at the time, Polytech drove down and got into an end goal situation. They were about the 5-yard line. The runner for Polytech got stood up. Aldis ripped the ball out from him and just took off down the field, and it was tackled. He was finally caught, but it ensured that Polytech would not get in the end zone before halftime. This was the Charter defense's 7th shutout of the season. Joseph Mira had a nice interception. Polytech, Balserac trying to make something happen in the fourth quarter. They had just had a turnover. They recovered from Charter. He went deep for the end zone. Joseph Mira intercepted it. And that was the 5th turnover for Polytech. And it just seemed like that took the wind out of their sails. This was just an amazing performance by the defensive Charter. This is the one game during the postseason I've said, Polytech, how in the world did they score no points? But it wasn't anything they did. It was Charter just continuously putting pressure here. And again, it's the same thing. Now Charter goes in against a Tatnall team that just annihilated them the first time they met. But a great win for Charter, and for David Eilers and his bunch. Boy, nothing to be ashamed of. They had a dream season. There's something to build on there now. Yep. They went to the state semifinals, much like Charter did. This year, this was their first semifinal as well. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So you had 2 teams, as you said, and I had this in my notes as well, that it really benefited from realignment. I keep seeing comments every now and then that, 1A is not good. And you know what? It's the level it is. And when you watch these games, they're competitive games. Yep. These kids are working just as hard as anybody else. The biggest difference, frankly, is size at these levels. The 3A teams are huge.
Both in numbers of players and how big the players are.
Exactly. And the roster sizes. Right. Yeah. Yep. So this was a great showing by both teams this season. And Charter just had their number in this game. There was nothing that Polytech could do to get on the board. They gave it all they had, just wasn't enough. So a huge win for Charter, who goes to their first state title game.
Yeah, and as we look ahead now to the title game, 2 teams that have never played in the state championship game. Marty mentioned Tatnall just beat the heck out of Charter early back on November 4th. It was 52-0. The mantra for Tatnall, I saw this online somewhere, is finish the grind. And so to finish the grind, they're going to have to win at Delaware Stadium. It is the 12 o'clock noon game on Saturday. And they've only got 26 players, Marty, on the roster. And it's the smallest roster, Tatnall, that is, the smallest roster in the state of Delaware. And they've managed to reach the state championship game. And as you said, that's what this Class 1 and Class 2 and Class 3 is all about. Because last year, Tatnall would have been in a division with Caravel, and Caravel's built like a Class 3 team, both in the size of the players and a number of kids on the sideline, and that just shouldn't happen. And so it's not going to happen. So I come from New Jersey, where there's 5 classes.
Yep.
They call them groups. It's group 1, 2, 3, 4. I played in a group 2 school that is now a group 1 school, and group 5 was all the private schools. So they've separated them out. So I get this system, and they need to do it for some of their other sports as well. Go from two systems to or 2 classes to 3, but that's another story for another time. For Charter School of Wilmington, they look at that 52-0 loss. They're going to look at that just like they lost at that blowout loss to Polytech from several weeks ago. And, guys, we did it once. Let's do it again. We're a different team, et cetera, et cetera. So this is going to be a good matchup, I think, and I hope. And we'll see how it goes. Again, I like that both teams, in all 3 classes. Class 3, neither team has played at Delaware Stadium. Class 2, they both have with plenty of experience. Mm-hmm. And Class 1, neither have. So there's really no home field advantage at all for anybody at Delaware Stadium. And I like that.
And this is one of those games. This really is a clash of styles in terms of you have the irresistible force against the immovable object. Tatnall has just mowed over everybody this season, including Charter in their first matchup. But Charter, 7 shutouts. I mean, they're having a phenomenal defensive season, and it's very hard to count them out at this point because of that. They lost to coming into the playoffs. We talked about on the air. They lost to Tatnall and Polytech by 92-0 score. So you're thinking they meet either of those teams, they're out. Well, they've avenged the 40-0, and as you said, the 52-0 just becomes a number now for them. It was a learning process. They've now seen Le Mans and company at their best. And John Hedrick has done such a great job making adjustments throughout the season. I'm curious to see what he's going to come up with against Le Mans. It's so different when Tatnall had Quinn DeVere, the sophomore quarterback, in early this season, and he went out with an injury. But when Le Mans took over, and having that ball in his hand to start every play just sort of changed everything for them. A lot of people thought, well, you have the quarterback. It's better to have someone who can get him the ball in space. He made his own space. Their offensive line is great, Tatnall. So it's going to be a clash, as I said, of a tremendously effective offense, explosive offense against a defense that just doesn't give up a lot of big plays. And this is a fascinating game. I can't wait to watch this game. I'm curious to see, like I said, the adjustments and how you approach a guy like Lamons the second time after being absolutely torched by him the first time. And for Tatnall, they've got other weapons, as I've said, beside Lamons. He can get the ball out to his receivers. They have a great offensive line, so I'm really looking forward to this one. And again, I would have said I'd say on the betting line, Tatnall's a prohibitive favorite, but it would not surprise me if Charter were to pull the upset because of, again, going into this weekend, every game I would have said, they're the prohibitive favorite and that's who's probably going to win. Because of what happened and how it happened this weekend, it changed my perspective on the way I look at a lot of these games now.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And the one team that we think could dominate has never trailed Carabao.
Right.
And so how are they going to react? And they might
Exactly.
react perfectly fine, but it's going to be interesting to see. So again, that Class 1A game is on Saturday at noon. And again, all the tickets will go on sale Monday morning at 9:00. We're pretty confident there's not going to be any day of sales at the gates. Doesn't mean you can't arrive at the gate, pull it up on the internet and buy a ticket. You will be able to do that. But again, don't expect to go up and pay cash for that as well. So, all right. So that brings us to the conclusion of our 1A, 2A, and 3A recaps and previews of the championship games. And it is now time to go on to the Grain Gridiron top performers from the semifinal games this week. Hopefully by now you know about Grain Restaurants, started by two local businessmen on Main Street in Newark. They've quickly grown to locations in Trolley Square, at the Summit Marina on the C&D Canal, in Lewis at the Ferry Terminal, in Kennett Square, and their newest location on the Star Campus in Newark, right across from Delaware stadiums. The menus have something for everyone, some usuals and some peculiars, but best of all, you never leave disappointed and you never leave hungry. Trust me, I've gone there dozens of times. My favorite part of Grain is knowing that it was started by two neighbors who had an idea, and that idea not only came to fruition, but it has flourished. And fortunately, they love sports and they love the communities. They don't just sponsor the podcast for us. They sponsor a lot of things for nonprofits and community organizations around the state of Delaware. And of course, that's Jim O'Donohue and Lee Michaels. So we appreciate them and what they do for the podcast, but just as importantly, what they do for the community. So It's time to announce our Grain Gridiron top performer of the week, but we'll start as we usually do with our honor roll. And Marty, I'll let you talk about our honor roll players, and then I will announce this week's Grain Gridiron top performer.
Well, it's funny. I was just looking through my notes, and both these guys were actually Grain Gridiron top performers earlier this season. They're runners up this week, but any other week they could have been the top guys. The first one is BJ Aline for Salesianum, who continues to just be a beast on the field. 115 yards, 2 touchdowns on 30 carries, 52-yard touchdown pass to William Newman late in the third quarter. That really it was kind of a dagger play for the Sals. And then, of course, more than anything, that rundown of the Middletown defender who picked up the fumble and had an easy path to a touchdown. It's just a phenomenal play, and again changed the course of that game. And even Gene Deladon said that changed everything for us, and that was the key to the game. Our second runner-up is Rashawn Lamons, a guy we've talked about a ton. This kid just does absolutely everything. He had 22 carries, 195 yards. He also had a pick 6 early in the game. He directed the offense. He just does everything, and he does everything well. So BJ Aline and Rashawn Lamons, with 2 great performances, are our runners up for the Grain Gridiron top performer.
And that brings us to the Grain Gridiron top performer. And it's going to be Cape Henlopen's Marty James. Just a sensational game in what people would call an upset for sure. He's had a sensational season, 30 carries in this game, 180 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick 6. So he was part of that scoring on defense late when they scored 4 touchdowns in 85 seconds. Marty James, our Grain Gridiron top performer of the week for the semifinal games in all 3 classes. We, of course, will send a gift card to head coach Mike Frederick. I'm sure he'll go to the Lewis location since it's right in his backyard. As the DIAA does not allow athletes to receive a gift or a prize with any monetary value to it. So we've decided that we would send the head coach, who's certainly partly responsible for that player's performance in coaching him, the gift card. So congratulations to Marty James, our gridiron top performer of the week. That brings us to the Diamond Hill Top Performance of the Week, sponsored by Diamond Hill Incorporated. They are in their 20th year as a business here in Delaware. They've been serving all of Delaware and the surrounding areas in all things construction, from commercial concrete and site development to residential projects. They have you covered. For more information, you can email them at info@diamondhillinc.com. That's info@diamondhillinc.com. All right, Marty, I'm going to give you my 2 top performances, and then you're going to give the third. All defenses here. And I'm going to start with the Caravel defense that shut out a Howard team that scored 34 points on them in the regular season, a Howard team that has scored more than 30 points in all but 2 of their games and scored more than 40 in 4 of them. Howard offense, I should say.
Yep.
And so, this is a potent Howard offense. Caravel head coach John Reed said in an interview after the game, we just made some adjustments, and they certainly did, to a shutout performance. So the Caravel defense is my first Diamond Hill top performance. The others is the Sally's defense. Those 2 interceptions late against Middletown, and one of the top quarterbacks, if not the top quarterback in the state, Austin Troyer, basically clinched the game, and they're advancing to their first title game since 2018. They also had 7 sacks. And Marty, you talked extensively about that defensive line. And so the Sally's defense is my second Diamond Hill top performance of the week. And Marty, I'll let you give our third.
And the third, this is probably obvious to a lot of people, is Charter, the Force. They go down to Polytech. They're coming off a 40-0 loss to Polytech in week 2, a game after which I kind of wrote off Charter and thought, you know what, they're not going to be that great. We didn't know that Poly was going to be that great at that point either. So it's great to see these 2 teams in the semifinals. But Charter, the defense was amazing. They recovered a fumble in the game's first play. They had a strip fumble return right before halftime. They had an interception that thwarted a Polytech drive, but to held Polytech to 0 points after Polytech had a fantastic offensive season. I give John Hedrick and Charter Force one of our Diamond Hill top performances.
So congratulations to them. And that brings us to the Marticelli Restaurant Group trivia question of the week. The Marticelli Restaurant Group owns the Chesapeake Inn, Klondike Kate's, and La Casa Pasta, all 3 restaurants known for great dishes. You can enjoy signature crab cakes and other fresh seafood at the Chesapeake Inn, homemade pastas and seafood specialties at La Casa Pasta, or Klondike Kate's famous cheesesteak, egg rolls, and nachos. We can't thank the Marticelli Group enough for supporting our podcast and, in turn, supporting high school football here in Delaware. All right, Marty, the floor is yours to tell us the answer from last week in the winner and introduce our Marticelli trivia question for this week.
Okay, well, I will say this. I forgot to write down the name of the winner. So I apologize for that. But if you won, you know who you are. I thought I had that in my notes. I do not. But I also I've been dealing with a lot of sickness in the past week. I don't remember the question.
We're just happy you're here, Marty. We're
there
just
you
happy
go.
You're here.
This week's question, and we're going to go back to 1979. I was 8 years old, and Cape Henlopen had a wide receiver, and in the 6 weeks prior to the championship game, this kid suffered this is how times change, by the way. This kid suffered 2 broken ribs and a punctured lung in a scoreless tie with Smyrna. Cape Henlopen and Smyrna played to a scoreless tie. So kids, yes, tie ball games did happen in the state of Delaware at one point. And Smyrna did not used to be very good. So anyway, doctors told this kid to be out for the season. He comes back for the championship game. He set what at the time was a championship game record, 7 catches, 173 yards, and 2 touchdowns to give Cape Henlopen their first ever state championship. They beat, again, times changed. They beat Caesar Rodney in the championship game 37-6. It was a standing room only crowd at, again, times changed, Lake Forest. So things were a lot different back then. I love this kind of stuff. But for a chance at a Marticelli Group gift card, who is the wide receiver who at the time in that championship game set a state record with 7 catches for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns? It set Division I championship game records for receiving yards and catches, I believe, at the time. What is this young man's name at the time in 1979? So I went deep into the archives for this one, John. I wanted to get
guess.
something with Cape Henlopen. And again, with their history, you have to go way back. So we turned back the Motorola to 1979 for this trivia question. If you know the answer, send it to delhsfootball@gmail.com. That's delhsfootball@gmail.com. Or you can send it to John and I through a direct message or something on Twitter or Facebook. And we would draw the winner by Wednesday at 8:00, and you'll be notified, and we'll get you your gift card.
There you go. The Marticelli Restaurant Group trivia question of the week. And that brings us to the end of this week's podcast. Don't forget, the unified semifinals are on Tuesday, and then all the finals Friday and Saturday. Unified game at 5:00, the 3A game at 7. Saturday, it's the 1A game at noon and the 2A game at 3:00. So it's going to be a great 2-day weekend, for lack of a better term, Friday night into Saturday of football. We want to thank the Grain Restaurant, Marticelli Restaurant Group, Diamond Hill Incorporated, Mary Kate Johnston with Remac Associates, and Dan Rigby, author of the Win Day Planner, for supporting our podcast, and the presenting sponsor, websitesforsports.com. That's websites, the number 4 sports.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at DELHS Football and on Facebook at the DLHS Football Pod. We'll be back for our final podcast of the 2023 season next Sunday. When we wrap it up, we recap all 3 championship games and just talk in general about what a great 2023 season it was. For Marty Sheehan, I'm John Buzby. Have a great sports week.